Hey, Crumbs.
Happy Sunday.
It's August. That's weird. There's no concept of time in Michigan, right?
Not really.
You're on that dateline anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Time zones keep changing. It's all very confusing here in the woods.
Hope everybody had a good week. What'd you do this week, Ryan?
I hiked a lot, which was good. Tried to write some music. I feel like 2020 is the year of me like trying to find things that I can get excited about, and then finding reasons why they piss me off. So this week it was really the Cubs.
Sure.
So, I'm a Cubs fan. You are a Cub fan, but I'm not a fan of their ownership and a lot of things about that team. It's Crumbs Sports Hour. Oh man, I should make a theme for that. But yeah, I was like, okay, baseball's back. This won't last long, but I'm going to watch some baseball. And then the Cubs are on some bizarre Sinclair broadcasting network now called Marquee, which is, insanely right-wing. So the Ricketts family sucks. Their TV deal sucks. Listening to the radio is great, but then I'm just like, should I do this anymore? So that's like a metaphor for 2020. Anything I find some joy in, I'm immediately like, can I like this anymore?
Is this even, am I allowed to do this?
Am I allowed to enjoy this anymore?
I feel, for sure. I feel the same way. I watched about half of one Cubs game, and I just, it's too weird with them pumping the crowd noise from MLB The Show into it. And I listened to a game on the radio, which was fine because it was like, okay, that's fine. But yeah, the Marquee Network, all that stuff. I feel like that way about hiking though, even because you see other people and you're like, oh, am I even should I even be within 20 feet of this person outside?
I have my mat, like a gator.
Yeah.
And I'll pull it up when people get close, and I get the looks like I'm an insane person,
right?
Like all the time. It's like People take it personally,
yeah.
And I'm like, this isn't me thinking about you in any way other than,
yeah. Come on, man. And that, speaking of being close to people outside, I wanted to bring up for us to talk about the Chainsmokers, the drama with the Chainsmokers show. Did you see all of that?
I did, and the first thing it made me think of who are the Chainsmokers?
I'm unfortunately familiar with them from a booking scenario in the past. I'm going to put a link here for people who don't know, but basically the Chainsmokers had a drive-in benefit show in New York in the Hamptons, and 600 cars showed up. I would guess probably 2.5 people per car, and of course, they all got out of their cars and went up to the stage, and we're all standing next to each other. And the manager of the Chainsmokers, of all people, is the person who shares this on social media. And now Governor Cuomo's doing an investigation, and they're trying to figure out how they even got the permit to do this. They're talking about, and then the Chainsmokers are digging in and talking about doing the same thing again in Nashville. And the mayor of Nashville is like, please don't do that. It's a great, first of all, I think it's understandable that you can't really foresee or do anything about people getting out of their cars and going up to the stage. You can they marked off 20-foot areas for people to drive their car in, and you can stay within your area, and they tell everybody don't do it. What I don't get is if you're the Chainsmokers and everybody comes up to the stage, how do you not just stop and be like, hey guys, I understand it's been a while. I'm really excited about this too. Please go back to your car.
Well, first off, you named your band the Chainsmokers. So
can we
you're
talk
probably
about what a waste of a band name that is on an EDM duo. That should be a killer 80s punk band, the Chainsmokers. Anyway, go ahead.
I feel like the job manager of the Chainsmokers sounds like somebody who is more of a manager of a regional barbecue joint than an EDM manager.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This stuff is also, what I'm finding out through all of this? I keep finding out how much bad music is insanely popular with stupid people.
Exactly.
Like
yeah.
it keeps like every week there's like, hey, this band you never heard of is huge. They suck, and all their fans are stupid.
That's true. And it says something about 2020 that I just saw when I was researching about that. There was a bunch of articles about how Post Malone was on Joe Rogan and said,
"Oh, a meeting of the minds there
on mushrooms," and said that he didn't blame the chain smokers. You can't put the blame on the chain smokers. And if you read further into the article, they're also like, also Post Malone talked about how he saw a UFO in person when he was 16. Anyway, it's like, how is his stupid comment about the chain smokers, which is not even committal in any way, the headline, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, he saw a UFO when he was 16.
That kind of stuff sounds like every episode of Joe Rogan's podcast. Throw in something that's like talking about trans people, negatively about trans people, and you got like, I think what every episode of that show amounts to.
Sure.
Sorry, Joe Rogan heads out there.
And then some plugs for some supplements and
boom. Fat people suck. Trans women aren't women. Aliens are coming to get us. DMT's all right. Joe Rogan.
Rogan. Yeah, go ahead.
I just it's bizarre that I keep hoping that there's going to be somebody who's finding. I think we're going to talk about this a little bit with our guests today, but you'll see some artists are actually doing interesting things, inventive things that are somehow going to move forward and might have a positive effect on this industry. And then you see people who are literally like killing their fans, which I don't see. Like, what's the benefit? They used to say like all press is good. There's no bad press.
Right.
That's bad press.
That's very bad
press. Like, to be the face of like, whatever, come to our shows, don't wear masks.
But
everybody get together.
Fans probably love it. They're probably like, yeah, I'm sick of being locked up. And I want to have fun and I don't care what the risks are. I'm 22 years old and blah, blah, blah. And then they go to the drive-in show and get COVID, maybe.
Well, isn't that how Herman Cain felt when he went to the Tulsa rally with Trump? How's he feeling about that now? Like, I'm sorry, I feel bad for the guy, but
I know.
He was just like, woo, no mask. Let's go to this he was one of those people. He's dead now.
I don't know that he felt 22, but
you don't think Rock You Like a Herman Cain felt 22?
Oh, Chucky Ducky. Speaking of doing cool things, maybe to try to move forward, we don't have to talk about this much, but there was an article in BBC that I read where it seems like a cool thing that England is doing like the government is getting behind these kind of test projects. And they're doing like shows like they took a 1,200 cap theater and put 200 people in it. And they had a show and they like tried it and everybody was like, okay, yeah, this isn't going to work financially. But like, they're just like, they're experimenting with different formats and the government's throwing a bunch of money behind it. And they're like, they just passed like a 1.5 billion pound relief program for artists in England, which is, I don't know, however many times smaller than the United States. Like, come on, hint, Congress, let's do something about this. But it's cool to just see, like, even if it's not our government, like somebody's like, maybe the next way to do concerts will come out of England and we won't have to invent it ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's all. Read that article if you're interested. Did you want to talk about Spotify or should we bring Chris on to talk about Spotify?
Oh, I say let's bring Chris on and let's start out talking about Spotify.
Okay, well, I'll bring our guests on then. Our guest today is Chris Weirsema. He is a talent buyer in Iowa City. He's been a talent buyer here for a long time. He used to work for the Picador and the Mill. He's currently a programmer for Mission Creek Festival and Witching Hour Festival, and he runs a music series in town called Feed Me Weird Things. Please welcome Chris Weirsema. Hi, Chris.
We should start pumping in crowd noise from baseball games when our guests come on.
Yes, we should.
I mean, going back to the to the show in England, I mean, that's what they're going to have to do in
Right.
1,200 seaters with 200 people.
Right.
It's like those incredible live recordings you hear of bands like back in their prime before they like blew up, and you realize there's still only like 15 people at the Suicide gig in like 1976. Like,
Right.
and then just like the shitty bartender in back just like slamming glassware down.
That's the way we like our shows. Well, let's jump right in with this Spotify talk. Ryan, why don't you were the one who found this thing. Why don't you?
Well, the CEO of Spotify came out this week with a really impressive stance, saying
It was
that
bold leadership.
yeah, real leadership, saying basically that, musicians and artists need to step up, and you can't only put out music once every 3 to 4 years. You really need to start upping your game. And he said this after Spotify posted like huge. I think they what did they get net $50 billion or something?
Yeah, they're valued at $50 billion, right?
He claimed they're still losing money somehow. They pay, what is it, 1/10 of a cent per play?
0.006 cents per play.
Yeah.
And it's just insane because it's him coming out and saying, essentially, I need, you want to succeed, give me more content.
Right. Exactly.
While also saying that, so give me more content. I'm not going to give you any more money for this, but you'll have more to stream and I'll have more to stream. And by the way, the reason that you're not really selling records anymore and you need to put your stuff on this platform, it's my fault.
Right.
Like making records is expensive and you're supposed to give them away now, but you should make more of them.
I mean, it's kind of like the record industry in like the mid 70s when it was expected, like every artist had to have a record every year to sell. And I mean, you look at the quality of the records. I mean, some of the worst Tom Waits records, the worst Elton John records, all of them came out then because they were just fired out at such an incredible rate. And that's why you can find 15 Carpenters records in every thrift store in America until the fall of civilization.
It's interesting because we talked about the Geiger interview. Did you listen to that, right,
Yeah.
Chris? And he said the same thing. He said his number one piece of advice to musicians right now is to create as much content as possible. So is this just like the industry being like, oh my God, when this is over, we're going to need to sell as much crap as we can? Please give us
like vampires fattening little kids up at a picnic table. Like, no, like keep eating.
The crazy thing is, like, the old industry used to be like one of those things all those records had in common, like the bad Elton John records, they had insane budgets.
Oh yeah.
Like they were spending money on making those things. Now it's like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to spend all your money.
Exactly.
Go into the studio. You know what? Even this, I'm going to set up playlists on Spotify because I know you can't sell CDs anymore. We got rid of those. Records are really expensive. And if you're able to press them, it's going to take a while to sell and you really got to mark it up.
Right.
But if you want to spend a little bit more money, you can buy your way onto one of our Spotify playlists. It's just, which is payola. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. But I mean, is there a single... I shouldn't laugh. I laugh derisively and with gallows humor because, like, I mean, has there been a single instance in the quote unquote recording industry where it was like, you know what, these are good guys. They're definitely helping artists out. Like, I mean, going all the way back from like Race Recordings and Alan Lomax and shit. Like this has been a crooked shell game from the get-go. And now it's just because now they don't even do the shell game for you. They just literally rob you.
Yeah.
right up front and on the way out too.
Wait, now hold the phone. Are you trying to tell me Phil Spector was a bad guy?
Yeah, I mean, at least he had creative like contributions.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, a lot of the guys who do the marketing or like the budgets for all of this, I mean, are the real vampires. But yeah, I mean, it's gotten now. I mean, you to get started, you hardly even hear of a label offering any kind of studio budget. It's put up all your own dough, come
Right.
with a finished product, and then maybe we'll let you lose money with us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we'll hook you up with my cousin. He's an agent. He's gonna have you playing every freaking every fucking show every night for 9 months, playing all the same stuff, and then we're gonna drop you in a year because somehow you didn't manage to record another record.
Yeah, and the lack of understanding that maybe the reason that it takes that long to put out a record is because bands don't make money off records anymore, so they need to tour for 3 years to even sometimes break even on what they lost on
Right.
the record. I've produced records or been in the studio with bands or had people call me about, you know, maybe a recording budget and had to say like multiple times, well, just be prepared to not make, like, you're not going to make this money back. Oh, do you think I should press vinyl? If you want vinyl, if you want it, but understand that, like, if you make a record in the studio, if you press vinyl, if you try to do PR, that's all on you.
Yeah.
And the chance of you making that money back, it could happen, but I wouldn't bank on it.
It A, has to be really good, and B, someone has to care, and that's like never going to happen.
Well, somebody always cares. I mean, for the worst music in the world, there's still somebody listening.
Looking at you, chain smokers.
Sure. But like, are you going to make your money back? No. A older, wiser man once said to me, like, if you're going to put out vinyl, make sure you own your own home, because you don't want to have to carry that shit around from apartment to apartment for the next 10 years.
That is true. I've moved a bunch of records a bunch of times.
Yeah. You'll find you care a lot less about your music when it's on vinyl and you have to physically carry it up 3 flights of stairs.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the guy from Spotify should just eat cancer and die. I don't think there's a whole lot of debate of like, well, I mean, he's got a point. Like, he's got a point in how bad the system has become.
Sure.
But, like, you know, pull your fucking music off Spotify.
Right. Well, we were talking about that before, about how the path forward before the show, about how the path forward starts with recognizing what's wrong with the industry as it is. So, I mean, obviously you work in a part of the industry that is, like, very unique, like, in that it, you know, I think that there is a lot in common between, you know, maybe the way that Americana singer-songwriters tour and indie bands tour, but you deal with a lot of people who tour internationally and are playing small shows on the international tours. What, from that perspective, like, you probably get a magnified view of everything that's wrong with the industry at that level. What are the things that you kind of notice that are the broken points, the big fractures in the industry?
Well, I mean, there are huge ones that I think are universal. So I deal a lot more with avant-garde, academic music, jazz, just anything that doesn't fit rock clubs. You know, it doesn't. It has to be seen live to sometimes really be fully appreciated, but it's not for maybe the casual, like, person off the street sort of thing. So, I mean, it's already got a limited appeal for a non-adventure. Like, people who dig the Chainsmokers are not quite, like, are begging to get into my shows. But a lot of the artists that I work with, particularly international, and actually a lot of American, I mean, they're also academics or curators themselves of series or venues. So they're putting in, like, or label, actually it's more common that they run their own labels. So they're used to having to do like from start to finish, kind of soup to nuts in every aspect. But they also have funding opportunities that I think a lot of your your average band out of the back of a van don't. And internationally, it's far greater than America. A lot of European countries, actually most other countries in the known world, put a lot more towards their performing arts than we do. I think it's out of Norway. I mean, they pay their bands to go to other countries and perform their music. They fly them over here. They subsidize a lot of their earnings to make it possible for them to do this as a form of cultural exchange. The American response is like, I don't know, be the fucking chain smokers and get a bunch of fans. Like that's not it. We don't because like it's we don't. This is going to slide into Marxism real quick,
as it well should.
Right, but we don't. We have internalized like the capitalist model to such an extent that it's become a moral value. That if you have 1 million fucking followers on Spotify, you're as good as it gets. We don't put a lot of cultural critique. We don't even have like honest to God criticism anymore. No. It's just like, I don't know, it fucking slaps. Like, like it's some like bald kid on TikTok giving like a two minute rundown in between hits of his DMT pipe, like, and that's like unbiased, like media, right? So, like survival in a creative market here is, it's a meritocracy of just sales and production. Like how much can you make?
Right.
One of the worst things when I was doing more, Feed Me Weird Things is done out of my pocket and with the help of donors. I may be moving into a nonprofit platform soon, but even to be a nonprofit, you have to spend money. Right. That's how fucking ingrained it is in the system in this country. It's like to be a nonprofit costs like $1,000.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you want to not make money? Give me money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll help you fill out, or we won't even help you. We'll tell you what you did wrong on the paperwork, and then reject your funding. So like it's done on a really, really small scale. But if it was done, if it had to be done by just pure gate sales, it couldn't exist.
Right.
And I'm biased, but the work that I get to produce that I'm lucky enough to attract here is, to me, some of the best music I've ever heard in my life. Like I'm at a point where like personal satisfaction, like it's worth losing the money because this is just incredible work that people are producing right now. But when I was working in the actual like club industry, what's the worst thing you have to say as a booker is like, I don't know, how many seats do they fill?
Right.
Like, what are they good for? Like when you
at my old job in Nashville, when I worked with Adam, who was on the show before, I booked, I would say 60% of the bands I booked, I didn't even listen to.
Sure.
It was just numbers.
Yeah. It's just, it's a spreadsheet. You put in the numbers and it works or it doesn't.
Right.
And there's a little bit of room for magic.
Right.
And then a huge amount of room for fucking disaster.
There was one moment I always remember where I was arguing with my coworkers about an offer for the Oak Ridge Boys Christmas show to do at this venue, and we were arguing about whether it should be like 15,000 or 20,000. And we finally, like, after like literally like 2 days of going back and forth on this, we finally sent it to the owner of the venue, and the owner goes, "Who gives a fuck about the Oak Ridge Boys?" And I was like, and that like snapped me out of it, and I was like, "Oh my god, I need to think about what I'm doing."
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I look at that. You know, Chris and I were working on a show together, right? That was happening like right when the kind of lockdown happened, and I mean, we were sending. Big Fish was sending Jamie Branch's Fly or Die out for their record release tour. Basically, the day things started to shut down, it was crazy.
Oh, I mean, it was like one of those apocalyptic maps you see in movies where, like, oh god, Toledo's gone, like, and like, oh no, Chicago's gone. Like, you're just watching lights go out all over the country. And
one of the things with that band, which I think is, you know, to what you were talking about, I think that's my favorite live band. It's just, it's an experience. There's not much like it.
No,
it's that band. You know, one member lives in Alaska, flies planes. Jamie lives in New York. The drummer lives in Philly. Like it takes a lot to get that together. And it is like the fine art world, you know, all of these people work in all these different projects. And one of the things that they had going for it, which Chris, you helped us get the grant. But there's, you know, this Jazz Road touring network. Yeah. And they were providing.
They just emailed me and asked me how the show was. I haven't written back yet.
But one of the things that I always think about looking at that in that world and in, I don't know, the art or avant-garde world is kind of like you were saying, they're all independent and it's all complicated, but there are these support systems, you know, touring grants and performing grants. Bryce, the guy that runs the Winter Jazz Fest in New York, where we also hung out, he's putting together this collective that's doing, they're basically commissioning work. So they have grants for that. And I would like to see some of that stuff enter into more realms of music, because it is really impressive to see something, you know, like for Jamie to do what Jamie was going to do without that grant was going to be really hard. To take an avant-garde quartet on a month-long tour across the US is a very complicated thing to figure out. And the grant allowed it to happen. And it is, you know, it's this amazing music. It is something people want to see. It's something that's important. You know, it's, I don't know how many boss jazz quartets are led by, you know, women owning the trumpet right now. So it was just this moment. But that, I kind of think about that with what you were talking about. Like, I would love to see more support networks after this thing that kind of realize that we should put money behind these cultural endeavors, that it isn't all just ticket sales and you know, being able to look at a gig, because it's going to be a while before we're back to the numbers we were before this thing. It's going to be a while before you guys with Mission Creek can just be like, money.
Have we ever done that?
That's not a real popular word around the Mission Creek table. I mean, and the Jamie Branch show was a real heartbreak for me, just because I'm such a fan of her work, and having to the opportunity to bring her to town a couple of times, and then to be able to do the Fly or Die thing, and just watching as things escalated. You know, you bring up a good point. There are grants out there. I think what sticks in my craw is how hard they are to find.
Yeah.
Because they're decentralized. I mean, a lot of this is still private money.
Exactly.
I mean, we're still asking for, you know, the fucking Waltons out of Arkansas, the Walmart dynasty, you know, who own a shitload of fine art and, you know, do the philanthropist thing. I like when it ultimately comes down to having to go on bended knee with your begging bowl to like ask for these things from, you know, your Rockefellers and Carnegies. Like there's still like as far back as that, there's still something fundamentally flawed with this system.
Yeah. Well, I think that the hitch there is like, you know, in these European countries where the government, or if the government is providing the funding, then it's kind of an agreement of the citizens of the country that we as a country value this.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's like, yeah. And like when it is private money, it's just kind of like somebody has to decide that you're worthy of, like an individual person has to decide that you're worthy of it.
And they can shut the fucking tap off whenever they want.
Exactly.
And I've seen that with friends and collaborators in the fine art world where, you know, not only are they, you know, are they able to access these funds for a particular project, but their salary is also paid out of these funds. And as soon as somebody's just like, you know what, we're actually, you know, we're done with our givings for the year. You know, then you've got a bunch of people unemployed and art sort of stuck in limbo.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw something at the beginning of this thing. It might have been one of the first bailout packages that there was all of this money for the arts. Like there was going to be some money allocated, and it all went to like the Lincoln Center, like all of it, like all of it.
I mean, I'm not going to bag on the Lincoln Center.
No.
We're losing stages all over the country.
That's more the point. That like there's a very narrow focus. I was in years ago. We set up this exchange. I didn't, but friends in Chicago set up this exchange between Strasbourg and Chicago. So all these bands from Strasbourg came over, and we would set up shows and tours and collaborate. And then they would bring some musicians from Chicago over, and a lot of long-term friendships were set up. And then when I put out my first solo record, we went to tour and toured with one of the bands that we met in Strasbourg. And as we toured around, they kind of were explaining to me how the program worked there, because they subsidize the arts there, and they subsidize bands. So all these bands in Strasbourg, and I'll probably get this wrong, but you have to qualify. So you have to play X amount of hours, you know, of shows, but they'll count a show day as, you know, 12 hours. And if you hit those hours, then, you know, your money from a show is taxed really high, but your income is subsidized by the government. So it's spread out. And the big reason they do that for all of these people is because they realize that the arts isn't just in the performance of the art.
Right.
That it frees you up for all this other stuff. And one of the really interesting things it did in that town is that all of those people were in the craziest bands. Like, you know, the band I was touring with, who would back me up sometimes, were almost, they're called Adam and the Madams. They were almost like Pixie-esque. And, but all the guys in that band, you know, one guy had like a P-Funk like band. One guy had, you know, a garage. One guy had an Afrobeat band. They all collaborated. They all did this different stuff because they were free to, and they were encouraged to.
Right.
And that program gets in, you know, I think all the time. And as with everything that's subsidized in France, there's always people mad about it. There's always people trying to get rid of it.
There's
but then
like
the French are
rioting. And,
exactly. While we were there, I think it was the police in Paris were protesting because they were being asked not to drink on their lunch break. It was something insane like that. And there was a protest. And I was like, France has it all figured out.
Yeah.
But anyways, like it really did foster this like very French art scene. And it's, and the idea of, even if you would bring that up here, I mean, we have a hard time convincing that people should be paid unemployment through a pandemic. But to say anything like maybe we should subsidize more for the arts in this country, people just immediately like freak out.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's the easiest thing to fucking hit the left on with when it comes to spending. because it's just like, oh my God, you want 100,000 piss Christs. Like, and I mean, yeah, but it's also my fucking money. So like, yeah, I would love 100,000 piss Christs as opposed to, a stealth bomber going after a kid throwing rocks. So,
Sure.
I mean, but
What do you
again,
mean American music? We need to remodel the Pentagon.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, what's the new bailouts? Got is it 300? It's 350 million for a remodel of a couple
FBI
rooms.
something like that.
No, that's billions.
Oh,
They want to put new drapes in the fucking White House.
I want to redo the Rose Garden.
Yeah.
So they're working on that.
Yeah, now I'm going to get angry. Now here come the angry letters from the drapiers of DC. We're like, that feeds my family. Yeah, I mean, it runs a whole lot deeper, but I think greater ownership of American creativity and collective ownership of it is something that we need to see more of coming out of this, because I think we've allowed people to stop engaging with the arts and stop thinking that it's theirs.
Yeah.
And it is, like the museum here in Iowa City at the University of Iowa had a program where they were actually taking parts of their collection. And it's a fantastic collection of abstract art that, with behests from Guggenheim in the 50s, but taking it to rural areas around Iowa and just being like, this is your fucking art. look at this. Like,
well, and I think about kind of what you guys do in Iowa City. I think for a lot of people around the country, they have an idea of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And a misconception about the state of Iowa, but they might be right about
I've
a
lived
lot
here
of it.
for 20 years, and I still have that misconception.
Right. But so
it's hard to shake.
And I think that you guys actively work against it, right? So you try to bring in particular with what you do, you're bringing in a lot of things. I mean, I've seen you bring crazy people in to play your series. And I think that's important for a city like yours, right? It's important to just be like, look, for as much as we like, for as much as Iowa likes this kind of music, for however many cover or whatever, people think of as a music scene there, the ability to bring in other stuff. I think it's a really big part of Iowa City, to be able to have a lot of different music, a lot of different art, the writing program. It's more than just ticket sales in a small city.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe that's what's got me waving the red flag. It's like the capitalist ideals here the numbers don't add up, but it goes to like a quality of life thing, and I think it should. I mean, I'm not saying that Iowa City's like doing it right, because we're also losing stages here just like everywhere else, but it goes into a quality of life that hopefully retains people, that it retains kind of the older generations, and it gives new generations ideas to go off and start their own thing somewhere else, which is really what communities should, in operation be trying to do. And also takes, I moved here from the west side of Chicago, and I think even then I was sort of bristled at the idea that urban centers had to be the center of culture. I mean, there's a lot of culture in them, but now, I mean, we don't all need to be in the same fucking space. And there's a lot of work that goes, that has to happen for that to work. But, and maybe I can sort of weave this into the next topic that I wanted to talk about today, which was the hybrid shows. Sort of what you brought up, Brian, with in London doing the socially distanced shows, which obviously didn't work. But I think last week or the week before, Nick Cave did a streamed performance through a UK promoter who was, only did live shows and has now started doing ticketed events to streaming shows. And this idea of decentralization, while it goes against, I think, a lot of our ethos of like live music, you gotta be there. Like sometimes you just fucking can't. Like,
right.
And I say this as somebody who has just ruined their life against the shores of music. I can't. I mean, I just get, now none of us can be there. But like, I just turned 40. I can't, like, the idea of a 5-band bill on a Wednesday night sounds like a fucking threat to me.
Oh, totally.
More than a promise.
For sure.
And I think we've also been, we're showing a lot of the cracks in our civilization are much more highlighted because of the pandemic. And I think one of them, just in my small corner of the world, is like who our audience is and who it can be and how it serves them, which is something that is like, Andre Perry, who's been on the show, is like a bedrock of what we're thinking about when, when we start doing Mission Creek. And I started thinking, watching this live stream, it's like, yeah, it's not ideal. Like, I definitely need to get a sound bar for my TV now if I'm going to do this. But like, there are people who never can go to live shows, pandemic or otherwise.
Right.
You have people with a variety of disabilities. You have people with young families. You've got the elderly. There are so many reasons to not be able to go to a show.
Right.
And I've heard it discussed before because I try to keep up on like all discussions around like festivals and booking because it's my job. But like, I really think moving forward, one of the things we're going to have to start doing as promoters and bookers and club owners is creating hybrid, sort of hybrid live experiences where, whether it's like, say, a small, like 300 person room, but like 3 stationary wireless cameras that can, capture stage and audience, as well as room mics and board recordings that people can either log into and see. I think we've seen really early days of what streaming is doing right now for shows and artists. And that's not going to go away. I mean, once that technology starts, it's going to go. But even me, who is by most definitions able-bodied, there's just nights where I know I'm supposed to go see this band, but I just got off a 10-hour shift. I made the mistake and I took my boots off, and like they're not going back on. And if I had the option to at least to just check them out, like I'd pay $10 to plug in the feed of like the club down the street from me performing.
Right.
And yeah, I haven't really kind of thought all of this. I don't have any solutions. I just had the earliest inklings of ideas. But thinking about fostering audiences and, we always talk about meeting people where they are. It's like, oh, you got to meet people where they are. And that's like, it's a lot of lip service when you're still like, okay, but you have to come here.
Right.
That this is an opportunity to not only generate more revenue for an artist, provided they're getting, you know, an equitable sum of the take from, you know, whatever your fee is. You know, actually you're creating sort of an infinite cap on a room. But if I, you know, using my lazy analogy of me coming home and not wanting to put my fucking shoes back on, I am watching it on my TV and I'm like, holy shit, these guys are like fucking phenomenal, and the audience that is there is like really reacting to them. The next time there's a band that I know I wanted to see, it's going to give me that much more pause before I think about skipping.
Right.
I mean, I think we have this illusion of being plugged in, and so it's easy if it's not on my screen, then I can ignore it. And so bringing stages to people's screens not only engenders, you know, a greater access to those who can't, but for those who can, greater incentive. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's my little spiel.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I also think that there are a lot of things to figure out. I mean, on the one hand, like if you're able to take a festival and stream it and get more money and get more eyes on your festival, I think that's great.
Yeah.
And I think that universally, I think we're going to see that happen, and I'm excited about it. I think with venues and individual shows, I think you're going to start running into stuff where if everybody's doing it, which I think everybody should, how do you limit it? So like if you're in Iowa City, what's your range? Because you're going to hit, you know, are you only going to broadcast it to people around there? Do you have blackout regions? I think that's one question. And then the content, you know, the devilish content word. The one thing that I was thinking about that I'd like to see in this stuff, kind of what you were talking about, Chris, is I can't tell you how many times there's a show at like 11 on a weekday that I'm not. I'm past the point of going to that. And I know that means midnight. And I know that like, I'm just not in the mood, but I would totally watch that the next day while getting work done. I would listen to it. So can you do a thing like when you rent movies now where you have access to this for 48 hours?
Yeah.
Whenever you want to watch it in there, it's up. And then what do you do? What do you do with that show once it's done? Because, you know, the other issue is that bands, you know, not every band is playing a fresh set every night.
No.
So you don't want the content to like live somewhere forever. You know, the bands have control, but I think these are all awesome questions. And I think it is, like you said, I think it is a great way to think about things in giving access to people who might not be able to go, whose lives might not allow them to go. I think it's awesome.
I mean, like I said, I am in like really early stages of thinking about it. But I mean, I think there are answers to all of this, and I think there's trial and error. I mean, we've had a century of touring, you know, music that we've been doing kind of the wrong way.
Yeah.
That maybe we could just take a fucking break and try to figure out and address some of the inequity that has been there. There is a woman who Jasmine, who plays in the band No Joy, and she posted an article or blog entry on the Earthquaker Devices site, kind of just addressing, not really, there's no agenda to it, but it's just sort of talking about, you know, hey, musicians aren't on the road right now, and that's not the worst thing in the world. Because there's, you know, so we were talking about access from an audience standpoint, but it works, I think, even greater, you know, maybe even greater from an artist standpoint of who's accessible to, you know, whose life allows them to try and have this non-career of like sort of like frozen time where they can travel around the country and play shows every night to fans. And still traveling this country, for better or worse, it's fine if you're a white guy, but like there are parts of the country where, or just the country, where if you're not, you run into a whole lot of hassles. And well, yes, obviously, all of that needs a lot of fucking work. But again, in this little corner, I can't solve that. But for artists, who have careers outside of the arts, being able to control their content and like, hey, we want to do this show for, say, the Midwest region, to set up something like this Nick Cave thing, which did sell tickets, which, I mean, I think once we're out of this, everybody's playing their music for free on Twitch for passing the hat thing. As soon as we're out of the woods on the pandemic, that's going to stop.
Right.
But, selling tickets allows you to control bandwidth so that, you're not getting your server completely crashed by too many people trying to log in. But, say it's a band who just, for whatever reason, the performers in there, they can't take 8 weeks off of their job to go play shows. I think we see that with, pricing in bands where, like, oh, we really want to get these guys. And I'm like, okay, well, it's $20,000 because that's literally like what is going to make it worth it to them.
Yeah. I deal with that all the time in kind of what we were talking about in the art and jazz world, in that, a lot of times people have to pay their band. These are professional world class people. Yeah. And so they have a number that they pay their band that they don't, that they have to pay that band.
Right.
It's interesting.
So something else that Jasmine No Joy brings up is, this sort of, I don't know if to call it the mom barrier, but if you're a woman in a band and you decide you want to start a family, I mean, you basically retired, or, unless you are operating at a level that you can bring your child with them if you want to even raise a kid on the road, with babysitters and filthy green rooms.
And somehow afford health insurance while you're doing it.
Right. And still be able to, I mean, there's still a huge gender barrier for performers that I think that the streaming thing would, again, it's not a silver bullet, but I think it would open up a lot more opportunities, both for artist and audience. That, I mean, we could start addressing, or at least trying to.
And in the devilish capitalist sense of things, it's a revenue stream, which keep getting taken away. So if you can find a way to make this make money,
right?
Why wouldn't you do it right now? Maybe then you could make more than one record every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, do you guys know who Alan Leeds is?
Yeah.
So I was just listening to this old Questlove podcast with him on it, and it's awesome. Alan Leeds was like tour manager for James Brown and Prince and D'Angelo. Like it's crazy. I think he worked for Kiss for a while. But at one point he was talking about, like, back in the day, like when he started working for James Brown, he's like, we didn't call it touring. It wasn't touring. You didn't go on a tour. Right. It was work. And he's like, back then, because you were putting out singles, and he's like, bands would put out singles and tour the singles. And if you weren't on the road, 50 weeks a year, you weren't working. And he goes, and now we've got to the point where it's touring, which is a different thing. And this is an old interview, but I was even thinking about that. And we're getting further removed from that now, which I think, I don't hate the idea of getting away from the traditional tour, like a long tour. Brian, we've talked about this a lot. Like, I like short, focused, regional things that make sense.
Right.
as opposed to just like, let's go out for months at a time and
I mean,
see what happens.
yeah. Again, it's great if you're young, white, and preferably have a little bit of money that you didn't earn. Like,
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is when we talk about new technology and sort of and creating new culture around it, the fear that I think people instantly have is, oh God, it's going to erase everything before it, and that's never happened.
No.
Like,
the exception of the 8-track. The 8-track got wiped out.
Sure, but it's still a collector's item. I mean,
Sure.
It is still revered. You can still have an 8-track made.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So, like, there's always going to be road dogs who just, like, they fucking live and die on Quick Trip coffee and roller dogs. and like, the Wiersema Kano. I mean, lifestyle. Yeah. That's not going to stop. Nobody's going to stop that.
Right.
I'm just talking about wanting to add more to it and allowing people the option to, like, hey, I don't want to fucking sleep on a stranger's couch every night next to a cat box. Like, there's another, there's another way that we can. There's additional paths that technology afford us, and I think this is one that we could use to better serve the audience that's already there and to attract the audience that has been shut out. And same with artists. Circling back to the Spotify jackass, maybe we don't necessarily, maybe everybody doesn't need to make a record every year, but if more people, like you see the explosion of Bandcamp and SoundCloud, we have the access now for more people to be involved. So we have more voices. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't love having to listen to everybody's fucking SoundCloud link, but that's like, that's me and my gilded thrones, like, oh, these people sending me their work. Like,
you already took your boots off, man.
Yeah. Shoes are off, pajama pants are on, art's not happening.
Yeah. So you wrote, Chris, it was initially a Facebook post and ended up being an op-ed or whatever they're called, editor's letter to the editor. That's what it is, in Little Village magazine, about the mill that closed here in Iowa City, which for people who don't know is kind of got that tag of institution in Iowa City. It's been around since the 60s. And
it was coming up on its 60th year. I mean, I think it was a few years shy of it.
Yeah. And you kind of, I mean, like, rightly kind of, looked at all of the people being like, oh no, I can't believe it's gone. It can't be gone. It's a institution, and called them out and said, well, where were you?
I mean, I called us all out.
Right. Sure.
I mean, in the condensed soup version that the Little Village ran, I think they kind of edited out my own self-indictment with it. But I mean, I wasn't going. I went some, but like my I think maybe my greater goal was not to call out the people who weren't there anymore, but to at least bring focus to these things that we call institutions.
Yeah.
The notion that it's always going to be there. I mean, we have all evidence to the contrary.
Right.
That your favorite place is going to die.
Right.
And, the mill, it is legendary in a lot of circles, as, it's a great Midwestern stop for bands. It had its own local scene that was really supportive. But we get this notion that things are always like that when we turn away from them, that they stop, that they freeze, they don't age more, like, you know, that we can just pause things, and that's not how they work. So I mean, I've worked at several institutions that have closed, and so I always take umbrage with the sort of like, you know, mock surprise, or like the banshee wails at the graveside of somebody you didn't see in the last 20 years, you know, because I feel like a lot of people shock and dismay, and this says more about my thoughts on people, but like more has to do with the horror of them aging than it does about the actual thing that's gone. Is they find out they're not that person anymore, and they're forced to confront, you know, a sort of a mile marker getting ever closer to their own mortality.
Right. And just like the outrage that people didn't care as much as they did when they were younger, which I saw a lot of that.
Oh my God.
Being like, when I was in Iowa, I would go there 5 nights a week, and now these kids these days.
Oh my God, the kids these days.
Yeah. Your past is more precious.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So,
but it's almost a metaphor. I mean, I kind of think what you just said could be applied to like music as a whole right now, because the country's on pause. Right. And I think that there are things happening nationally where people make the assumption that, you know, there's going to be a vaccine and then everything's going to go back to how it was. And it's like, you know, no, we don't know. You know, there's mills in every city right now that are closing.
Yeah.
There's all of this stuff happening. There's all kinds of artists wondering, you know, I mean,
where are we going to play when it comes back? Yeah, sure. That's a huge question.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of people who are like, oh man, I think about it myself. I'm a middle-aged dude who's like, wow, how long am I gonna run this gamble? Like, you know, how long am I gonna keep doing this? Because I think my path or my past is precious.
Right.
And, you know, do we all? Not to get dark. Not to get dark, but I think that it's a weird thing that when you look at the actual stuff happening and these bailout plans and kind of what you were talking about with moving forward, in one, I think that if music and if art is precious to you, you need to act on it and you know, tell your congressperson that. And two, as people
I'll sandwich that in there with also don't fucking kill me.
Yeah, don't kill me.
Right.
But and throw some money this way.
I heard Louis Gohmert caught COVID at the Chainsmokers show. But I think the flip side of that is, you know, while we're paused, because I think it's safer for me to say this than you two. The Mill wasn't perfect.
No,
none of these venues are. There was a lot of things that there were a lot of things going on. That so when we have the ability to press pause, because I love that place, but it's also being able when you press play again. You know, I don't want us to pick up where we were.
No,
I don't want
music and touring in general.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a wasted opportunity. And you hear it like, I just want things to go back to normal. Like, fucking why?
Normal stuff.
They were awful. We were just like all being really good sports about it.
Yeah, you remember February? It wasn't great. The news wasn't great.
Yeah. So yeah, I think if we allow things to go back to normal, then we have just colossally failed.
Yeah. And that's not, I don't mean to talk, I'm not talking shit about the Mill at all. I'm just saying that
there's a lot of shit you can talk on the Mill, but
kind of to what you were saying, it's like this, everybody remembers things as being precious and important because that's how they felt about it. But we also have to be able to look at these things and say, you know, I think this will transition into the last thing I wanted to talk to both of you about, but in particular, Chris, I think you guys have done a really good job of, is equity the right word, of representation in your festival. So on one hand, you're booking a music festival in Iowa City. You have to sell tickets to a music festival in Iowa City. You have to have people to come to it. You also have to curate to your tastes.
Right.
And the people who book the music, you all have different tastes in music. But I think you also do a really good job of getting a lot of different voices in. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot in when we press play again, when this comes back, is equity in the music business. And how do you guys, what's your process in that, in putting something like Mission Creek or Witching Hour together? Just representation or equity.
Well, it has to first come with like what we want to see out of the festival, not who we're going to attract in terms of audience. And I think that's a way that we're able to stay honest with ourselves. Is like, yes, we care people show up, but like it's
that much.
Fuck are they gonna do? The only way it's managed to stay interesting, I mean, fuck, was this going to be our 17th year? Maybe
16th. Yeah, because this was going to be 15.
Oh, this was going to be 15. Okay,
I think. Yeah,
that sounds right. Anyway, that's like ancient in dog years and festival years,
right?
And the only way I think we have been able to I don't know, like stay on it is searching out voices that we want to hear represented, that we think will benefit our community if they're represented, that we think are going to that inspire our community if they're represented. And then, I mean, it also comes down to fucking whose work is the loudest right now.
Yeah.
And that's a thing. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't also a pragmatic discussion of like literally percentage wise, like, okay, like, we've created this master list of like, 50 to 70 wish list artists. Now, like, how many white guys are on there versus versus everybody else.
Right.
Like,
and it's shockingly hard. It doesn't sound that hard, like, to an outsider, I think, to be like,
right,
there's plenty of great, women of color, and there are, but there are so many more white dudes. This business is designed, like everything else in the country, to be awesome for white
dudes. Yeah.
And it's and as a result, like, you get flooded with white dudes. And I mean, really good women of color and just people of color in general these days are in higher demand because of all the talk about it. And that means they get more expensive too. Right. So we have budget things too. So it is just kind of like a math equation of like, okay, we need like, and then, but also like, I don't know if we said this on the show or if it was before the show with John last week, like, there aren't that many white dudes making super interesting music. And so that kind of makes
I mean, like, in the planet, in America, like,
my favorite response I ever got to a year at Mission, because I've played Mission Creek a lot in different capacities, and the best is one year. I'm friends with all you fellas, and my favorite response to anything ever was like, I don't know about this year. I think we are like at enough white guys with guitars, and I'm like, perfect. I think you're right. I am glad that that's a great answer. Like,
yeah. I mean, and not to push this off on the boogeyman of the industry, but yeah, I mean, like cost is a factor, just availability. Like if you have 3,000 white guys with guitars, like ready to
literally routed, yeah,
right, ready to go at a moment's notice, and you've got 40 women of color, people of different gender and sexual or orientation. You got like 40 to maybe 100 that agents are like really looking to push. I mean, also it comes from an agency side of like who they're pushing. Mm-hmm. Are they all available?
Right.
Maybe half of them are. Are they affordable? Maybe half of that half are. So I say that not to excuse any years that we've tipped too far to the white side, but I say that as a warning post that it can happen if you're not actually breaking down the numbers constantly in booking meetings. It can happen like that,
right?
Where like it just like, and I don't think that that's true of a lot of festivals, because I don't think a lot of festivals really gave a shit until recently. Sure. But hopefully now more we're going to see people doing that math and asking themselves those questions.
I think it's even harder at the big festival level because of who the industry and consumerism has propped up. You know, if you're doing like Adam was talking about booking Kaboo with an $8 million talent budget, and you have to have a headliner, the size of Jimmy Buffett, there's, I don't know how many women of color are that size and available to headline to festivals in a year. I don't know.
So that does mean that as a programmer, you got to dig deeper.
Totally. Yeah.
You have to get outside, and I mean, I think I don't want to undersell that we've made an effort that I appreciate when people notice it. But we've also, because we're never going to be like big dog like festival, like we've been wanting to get away from headline, tiered name sizes on poster bullshit. And even like, I get sick of like, oh, fucking Parquet Courts had an album this year, like, so I guess we're doing them, like, because then we've got so many of these big size festivals now where like the name, like it's all the same names. They just shuffle them around.
Yeah, it's the same festival, and like one's in a polo field and one's on a farm.
Yeah. So I mean, as programmers, like you dig deeper. Like maybe this artist hasn't had a record out in a couple years. Do they still fucking rule? Cool, call them.
Right. Well, and I think the thing I like about the way you guys do things and those festivals, I mean, Chris, I think we met the first time at Big Ears, which is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
But you guys, like one of the things that I like and one of the things that I want to see more of, and I think this kind of also plays into what we were talking about being old men who don't want to go. I don't ever want to go to Lollapalooza. I don't ever want to be in a crowd that size ever again. I do not want to be. I'm not interested in it. But if I have the chance to go to a festival that's diverse, that's curated well, that I'm gonna discover new bands. And I can do it in clubs, which is my favorite way to see a show.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hear a multitude of different voices and different styles. Like I'm at that all the time.
Yeah.
I'll do that forever.
Yeah. Same.
I'm way more interested in that than being like, oh, the Foo Fighters are headlining Lollapalooza again. Yeah. Wow.
What kind of crazy antics is Dave Grohl going to have for us this year? Like,
I remember my last giant festival that I went to when I went. I'm too old for this. I was at Lollapalooza. It was the first time Obama was running for his first term.
Okay.
And Rage Against the Machine was reuniting. And I was standing at that stage, kind of just like already feeling like, I don't want to be here. I'm too old for this. And then the girl next, there was like a group of teenagers next to me. And one of them said, like, I heard Obama's coming out. And this rumor started, and all these people were like, Obama's going to come out. And I turned to them, and I'm like, there is a giant sickle, and like there's a giant Russian flag on the stage right now. And Rage Against it, like, I don't think he's coming out.
Right.
Like, just the optics alone, I don't think he's coming out. But
first year in politics, huh, kid?
Yeah. But it was just, it was kind of realizing that, like, oh, this isn't for me.
Right.
But I like discovery at music festivals. I like, you know, like, I even like going to festival shows in a club where I'm like, I hated that band, but I'm glad I was there.
And that's what I want more of. I mean, again, like, I can only like operate and book from like my own center of like what I want.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, yes, I'm selfish, I'm human, but like for me to like honestly do the job to the best of my ability, that's how I have to operate. And I want discovery. Like, you want to talk about Lollapalooza. I was there in 94 and 95. So I was 14 and 15, which is exactly the age you should be going to Lollapalooza.
I went too.
Yeah. And I saw the Boredoms on the side stage and just blew my fucking mind. like, I mean, first of all, it was just insane. It was the middle of the day and just like sun beating down on like hard black tarmac asphalt. And Yakamura Ai is just, he's got like the little suntan glasses on and like neon spandex and is just screaming into the mic so hard over and over again. And then throws up and then continues screaming. And I was like, this is the most punk rock shit I've ever seen in my fucking life. And I mean, it definitely like changed a part of me.
Well, and then maybe like to bring this full circle, I think that's the kind of thing is that, you know, the answer to some of this stuff isn't, you know, and then that band went and made a whole lot of records and they put them on Spotify. No, it's, I think the discovery is the question, is the issue. And I think like coming out of this, kind of what you do and a lot of what we're talking about is it's curating. That's where discovery comes from. It's not that these bands need to make more records. It's that they need to be able to play places like Iowa City, who a band that is on your radar, that you probably can introduce them to the people that they're going to like. That, I mean, it's discovery, it's curatorial.
I mean, the discovery aspect to me is always like the religious moment.
Yeah.
Like, just like, oh, fuck, I didn't know this was my favorite band. Like, I've never heard of these guys, and I didn't know that they're like that. I needed this so bad in my life. I mean, to me, that's like, I mean, you know, they talk about like that the difference between gospel and religion, and like that's gospel.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And it's happened to me so many times. Like I am so fortunate. Like, no matter how bitter and just, you know, fucking fussy britches I can be about music, like, it happens to me constantly. Right. And it is such a huge, as a non-religious person, to have those moments is everything. And so somebody else has done that for me. Somebody else has prepared that confluence of events that I just happened to be there, and it happened. And so, like, you know, making zero monies and spending monies to facilitate, like, I don't even think of it as, you know, like, maybe one of these days I'm gonna break a big band. Like, but it's like, it's my duty as somebody who's gotten so much out of live performance to facilitate that for other people that I will never, ever talk to. You know, I will never know that I had anything to do with it. Like, and like, that's my charity.
Well, that's a good note as any to wrap this one up. This is the most positive ending to Crumbs we've ever had. In my
And it's with me.
yeah.
Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria.
Thanks so much for being on the show, Chris.
Thanks, guys. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
I gotta get my crown. I need to find some